Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to LEGO DC Supervillains. We are going through these levels and it is just reiterating as we go through the story mode how much you just really jump all around. Like Harley in the Ivy entrance, for instance, as the last level we did, started in the botanical gardens, which would have been here, and then even in the cutscenes there's just not really an explanation as to why you would have ended up at the Gotham communication tower, whatever it was called, this building here. Like, and now we are going from this point theoretically to Arkham Asylum, if the level is to be believed. But this, whatever level this is, definitely did not feel like the Arkham in the overworld. Let's see, we're gonna have to go through this point, and we could possibly skip this point and save a little bit of time that way. One thing that occurred to me as far as different ways you could have written all of this, like all the cutscenes, first of all, are just like this, where it's Jimmy Olsen and Lois Lane, and then you just have somebody, some villain showing up somewhere. As far as the actual cutscene that would have been narratively connected. In the different ways you could have rewritten this game, it is interesting that there was never even a single level here that really felt like a heist movie, which, yeah, why wouldn't that have been the case if you're playing as supervillains? A heist movie where there was several objects that you were stealing, and then, oh surprise, it turns out the several objects are all Pandora's boxes, or some item that Lex Luthor is tricking you into collecting to build some kind of machine, or a collection of items to even defeat the crime syndicate. It would have probably made a lot of sense to have you collect, say, kryptonite and see if that worked against Ultraman, the crime syndicate. Interesting. I didn't know Joker would be able to fly. Who was that other character that was voiced? This guy. This guy is being voiced by a comedian who has since died. Gilbert Godfrey. Maybe he actually voiced Mr. Mxyzptlk in the cartoon. I wouldn't be surprised if he did. 73918. I have no idea what that number means. And opening that door seemingly has done nothing for me. I'm just gonna walk around the walls. I could only just assume that there was some kind of studs to collect back behind that. Yeah, this is all the Arkham 1886, which should be really its own separate level. Oh, I guess it would make a lot more sense that I'm just supposed to break this. Seems like I would need Batman though. Well, that worked. I don't know if that should have worked.
This should be no problem for me.
Generally speaking, if they were going to have silhouettes of things you could build, it feels like those silhouettes should be used in other places. And we've seen that in LEGO games before, where you're prompted to build some kind of device and it makes a silhouette so you know what you're building before you build it. Let's see if we can destroy some alarms and save ourselves some annoyance. Gotta find the right button. The thing there, if you're going to introduce Gotham 1886, or 1860 or whatever, the Gotham by Gaslight concept narrative, it really needs to be its own underground area as big as Gotham City would be. And that is doable, certainly. That they could have, instead of making Smallville and the Swamp and Arkham, and all those kind of open area sections, they could have just had a Gotham City with a Gotham City under it. That would be a great way to potentially integrate like, if you were going to have an open world where you saw a lot more of the villains' layers, it definitely would make sense to have an underground tunnel system that broke through walls and led to a bunch of layers. In fact, that would be kind of an interesting idea in general, that there are so many supervillains in Gotham City in particular, because there's a whole city built upon a city architecture, which leaves a lot of room for it leaves a lot of room for villains to build layers and hide from the police and evade capture. This should work, and yet it's not. Oh man. Let's just turn into Deathstroke. Now, I guess it's important to mention that there is actually a whole underground city in Gotham, at least in one story, where something like the Morlocks in the Time Machine story live, a bunch of like really deformed type people. Okay, we see something here. So we should try and get that thing first.
Way too cramped in there. Time to stretch my legs a little.
So we're freeing big ticket characters. This probably isn't going to move the story forward. I would definitely question, though, whether that many people really liked that DC comic where they introduced the idea of a entire another section of Gotham. It, in a lot of ways, was just introduced so they could introduce new characters. But it was also, in part, I think, built around the story of the Joker potentially dying in an earlier instance in which they killed off the Joker. I'm just gonna have to switch to reverse flasher. And this time to really set into motion the idea that they had killed off the Joker. They had him actually, like, personally cut off his own face, and there was this grotesque Joker face that was in the narrative for a long time. But like most things in comics, it all gets undone eventually, and so the Joker sews his face back on or heals, or they introduce the idea of there being 3 Jokers, and they just retconned it and undid it, or they rebooted. That may have been slightly before the New 52 reboot. I think it actually was after, though. And I only vaguely remember these events, which I suppose I should have put that disclaimer at the beginning of this whole series, is that I am going to misremember and get things wrong quite a bit. My 2 or 3 year foray in trying to be a DC comic fan did not end with me actually being a DC comic fan and becoming a particularly large expert. That being said, I've been able to fake it quite a bit because there's just so much in the DC canon, and the Marvel canon too. There's just so many stories. Like, I could generically say that at some point I remember Superman fighting a super giraffe, and I would have a very high chance of finding a story that would corroborate that claim, even if I just make up a claim, because particularly when you start to talk about like Batman and Superman, they've been around so long, decades and decades. They've done everything. Which is an interesting point to point out and make, in that there really is no stopping point. There's just no ending. As much as they hate endings, or a lot of people hate endings. Can he do that? There should be a point of retirement, a point of your narrative story being done. There is a side story called Whatever Happened to the Cape Crusader, which is kind of a collection of potential endings of Batman, ways in which he would have died, either by growing old or by... Is this ice that's supposed to be melted? It's kind of weird that Martian Manhunter would have fire or laser eyes, since he is weak to fire. Although that is an interesting idea, to have a superhero that is weak to his own ability. And it's weird to have meltable ice in general. But the main thing you can take away in knowing that there's a non-canon side story, there's a collection of how Batman's story would end, is that DC editorial would never let Batman's story end. They'd never let him grow old. We would never be able to hit a point like the Batman Beyond story where you would even have an old retired Batman and a new Batman. I would say Marvel maybe is a little bit more willing to push Miles Morales comics, but not to any extent that they really would stop making Spider-Man comics with Peter Parker. They're willing to push Miles Morales a lot more, particularly in other genres. I've noticed that a significant amount of these puzzles get a little bit easier if you jump over some sections. Depending on the layout of these puzzles. But I would very much prefer an instant solve. Just have the character jump in, jump out, start the next animation. Yeah. A true ending to a lot of characters would make all the sense in the world. And then on my other thought, as far as the idea of heist movies, I think you can probably open up your writers to having more options if the main goal was to get an object and the secondary goal sometimes was to fight somebody who was protecting that object. It definitely also feels like these characters are not being particularly easy to figure out. I'm also just hoping that I'm not missing something. You can see there's all kinds of arrows to point. A lot of swapping back and forth. Okay. Okay, this is new, so let's see if we can get the color patterns. Okay, so it's the color pattern on the left and the color pattern on the right combined. And then they cycle through colors. Okay. And then, because this guy's being controlled, he's making chicken sounds. That should do it. And that unlocks a character. So is this supposed to be some kind of like brainwashing or mind control experiment in Arkham, or something else? It's not really clear as to why that would exist. It definitely seems weird also to have objects you need to collect kind of just hidden from visual view. There's a Lego soccer ball, which that's a real Lego piece that doesn't really ever get used in the Lego games. If you were making a Lego City game, something that wasn't more licensed around those kind of ideas, it would, or around super ideas, it might make some sense to have a soccer mini game, but it wouldn't be very Lego-y. Not that much of the Lego game sections are that Lego-y. We're destroying all these silver statues. Notice how they have like a mini kit right next to a graffiti section, perhaps to help you find graffiti sections or just know that that's a thing. Although this is like the 4th level, so if you didn't know what that there were graffiti sections by now, you would have to pick that up later. So where are we on collectibles? We have one more mini kit. I don't see any mini kits being shown here, so I'm assuming it's in the next section. One of the big disconnects you can see between the main game and these levels is that they just don't even bother to program any kind of waypoints into it. Like, it would make a lot of sense for there to be a waypoint and a ghost stud pointing one direction to the next direction to the next direction. Here we have Joker stuck here that doesn't know how to escape. Here we have a Joker here that doesn't know how to escape. That is created. A situation where it's just me, which honestly that's better. Getting in this elevator doesn't do anything. I see a collectible here. So you have to just throw that. And then the last one is up at the top. Like, do I even have a character that would throw a grenade?
Wait, I can't use this. Looks like this.
Yep, Batman can blow that up.
Why?
And that's everything, so we could, in the game here, in the level, or we can just see it through. In this instance, you only do one shot to destroy it, and I think that should have been the way things had always gone. So you free no less than 3 enemies or 3 bad guys in this story. In this one level. I don't remember this. Like Jack in the Box. Like There's just nothing up there. Or maybe there is something up there. Are we supposed to fly up here? Or was that just the way you get up to that area? Jeez, it sure seems like there's more stuff here than I thought there was.
Of course.
Crashed into something. I really don't think I would ever manage to pull one of these off without crashing. Although this one felt like it might be a little bit slower. You'd think that these would get more difficult as the story went along. But they kind of don't. There definitely is this problem in these levels where you are just running in circles doing random activities. And in this case, even if you weren't going to bother to have ghost studs or regular studs point me towards the exit, sure would have been helpful to just have a red exit there and have perhaps some check marks of Lego goals. Like if you told me I had to say have Solomon Grundy, that would be helpful. Or if there was a bunch of buttons everybody had to step on to open the door, that'd be helpful. And even the cutscenes here are really just showing that they're jumping the characters around. So we were already in an area that looked very much like Arkham 1860 and not very much like Arkham, and we got dropped down to an even lower section that is this big round boss battle, which I have to say I just don't think was particularly a good design. So much so you can even see how the map is marked to assist you. Let's go into this central part just to double check. I think I already collected everything. Well, I really don't even need to check, but that wasn't the entrance I was looking for. Like, I know I already have everything. But yeah, we were looking for a red brick, and so we spent a considerable amount of time in this area. And it is just this big round chase sequence, which I could see potentially taking a spin on this on the chase sequence in between two areas and having a monster chase you instead of fighting him in circles. I don't get the whole idea of hiding in the closet, though. That was clearly a concept that doesn't get repeated anywhere. And it'd be nice if you could just do this and it would work and you would just have super grapple. But yeah, we spent a lot of time trying to get up here, and I don't think we ever really did figure out the right way to do it. Just kind of had to cheat. You press this button and then it explodes that, and then there's a bunch of stuff up there. And in non-free play mode you wouldn't be able to fly, and in free play mode in general you're not usually asked, I mean you are almost absolutely not asked to do just a flying upward action to reach a place. So I spent a lot of time thinking, well, maybe there was an acrobatic ability or something that was supposed to have you flying up this tunnel, this vent pipe. It's not even really visually depicted well that, I guess, a burst of air came up this pipe and then through this pipe and went through a right angle and then bypassed all these vents with enough pressure to reach this point. Yep. And that connects to that wall. Do we have anybody who's acrobatic? Let's see if we can find a character that we know is acrobatic. Like Harley Quinn is acrobatic. Yeah. So if there was supposed to be a wall jump somewhere, it didn't get added. And I really just assume this is a very unfinished piece of level. And this is perhaps the worst example of an unfinished piece of level, but only by a little bit, because we see a lot of other unpolished elements. And see if that's a live wire thing. Can I even walk on this? See if we can maybe fall off the edge and get in that central part. No, that doesn't make sense. So yeah, if you could walk on top of this, that also wouldn't get you anywhere. So this is just a odd section. Can't jump. Livewire can't jump as high as some of the other characters can, because she is this ball of electricity. Gonna have to actually rotate the other direction. Whereas every other puzzle I've ever done with this, I've managed to basically only press the right bump. Also severely breaks the idea of the left bump being a photo mode. If in that point in the game it does something different. And this will be the last thing we do. You don't need to go through the entire fight. And I assume what was behind this. This isn't gonna work. I need to get the characters oriented differently. I assume there was a red brick back here. And we are over 1 billion studs. So, by far over 1 billion studs. Does that matter? Not really. We have ridiculous amounts of studs and nothing to spend it on. It might point to us getting to maybe 25 or 30 studs, 30 billion studs overall. But what you don't see here, and you won't see, is getting up into the 100 billion, trillion levels of studs. Which maybe there should be some kind of mini game during the credits or after the credits in LEGO games to get as many studs as possible. Even if it was just studs floating around the screen as the credits scroll by, a more interactive credit sequence would be better for a kid's game. Unless you want to do a cutscene with credits scrolling at the same time, which that's not a terrible idea too. I know people who work in movies and TV don't want credits to just scroll by as the video is playing and people are distracted. They really want people to pay attention to the credits, but the truth of the matter is credits are really for the creators. They're not for the consumers of entertainment. So yeah, we went in that level from this building following a different group of people in Arkham, even though it didn't feel like Arkham, and we just went from one part of Arkham to another part to the lower part of Arkham until we escaped. The Joker escaped, I guess. Video game credits in particular are getting longer and longer, so some interactivity in the credits, since the game itself is interactive, does make a lot of sense. And even though the credits are getting longer, it's still often big problems of people who deserve credits in video games not getting them, which the people who deserve credits in video games are basically anybody who worked for even 1 second on the project. So we unlocked Firefly, also known as Garfield Lens, a former pyrotechnics expert who had an obsession with fire. Garfield Lynch fell on hard times when he turned to a life of crime, drawing from the skills he had acquired throughout the years. He built himself a special suit and became Firefly, a criminal with a burning ambition for chaos. Detective Comics 184, 1952. I would heavily suspect that a pyrotechnic, somebody with obsessions around fires, would probably burn themselves or display dangerous behavior long before they actually became a successful fire effects pyrotechnician. You would hope there would be enough tests to weed out pyromaniacs. It's not a terrible bad guy though. In general, we can avoid the second part, which is the fighting section of this level. It's not a bad idea to have a bad guy that is potentially just around the idea of arson and burning people and starting fires. Only 4 characters again. And this is yet another area that takes us just in a completely different area.
The Justice Syndicate villains escape each and every time. These heroes aren't...
So despite a couple of hiccups, the Galaxy Communications Tower is open for business.
So I think there was a point where we, in some cutscenes, we're missing some cutscenes, it feels like, but maybe that's just because I'm skipping them. But there would have been a point where we would have gotten on a plane and flown all the way to this other Monkey City section. Here we have a different variant of Green Lantern. This is from the Lego Movie 2, and you can see he has this like black robotic arm. Okay. I may not need to do much of anything. You can see there's kind of an invisible wall splitting the foreground and the background. I'd say this is probably a wasted effort of a level. You're not going to fight monkeys anywhere else. And I definitely don't enjoy the idea that you have to laser the golded vested characters. I feel like I never figured that out in the main game, and they may have just let me defeat them after punching them a bunch. The slight tease of the screen disappearing and then blocking your view, like that's not a terrible idea. We spent a lot of time, I recall, in this level before. What would have needed to happen if you were going to do a monkey enemy collection of monkeys, then it would have made a lot of sense for the monkeys and the gorillas to take over a section of Gotham and overrun Gotham, which that's not a terrible thought. overall to just have. So it does seem like you were just supposed to jump in here. Wait, kind of wait for it to disappear to collect it. Let's find a character that can fly. Somebody that can really fly. Yeah, there's no entrance on top here. I could have easily missed that. At the very least, you have the monkeys. That's an interesting logo of graffiti. Like, you would have the monkeys just running around Gotham, even if they didn't take over a specific section. And you would have some overworld challenges around fighting monkeys. Even if it was just a random, like, monkey challenges of random monkeys. This was also a strange level in the fact that you kind of get attacked by groups of enemies, but I guess previous levels have done that, where you've been attacked by groups of enemies spawning in. Do I want to risk it? I think we can. We see two teleporting mini kit arrows being pointed there, and two mini kits are all I need, so. It would have made a lot of sense to have the swamp level like turn into the monkey controlled section. That would give the swamp more to do. Alright. So we had to pull that down and let the boulder break it. They even have a good spawning animation in that these monkeys spawn from above the screen. We're doing like dentistry on the giant mouth, which is kind of funny, but it is questionable certainly as to where did all those teeth come from, because they weren't there a second ago. And yeah, we could go a little bit further and go to the next section and see the boss fight. I don't think there's a lot of value in doing that though, particularly since we are just skipping all the cutscenes. This is one point where they tried to make Cheetah feel like a much more important character than she probably should have been. Obviously there is a collection of villains here, that they're trying to focus on because they would have been the villains in the Justice League comics. I mean the Justice League cartoon that would have been really old. And there seems to be a lot of influence there as far as the Legion of Doom original people, instead of being more focused around telling an original story with the characters who are actually still relevant and popular. Another crash. Another crash. It seems to me like if you were going to manage to not crash, you would also have to collect all 10 of the pieces you need to collect on the first option and not miss any. I will be fairly frustrated if there is an achievement around that. Like, noticeably, either this game is glitched and is not giving me a bunch of achievements, or or there is a lot of achievements around combinations of characters. They specifically attack here so that it shows you what you're supposed to do. We can see all the bad guys on the background cheering you on, and all the monkeys cheering on Solivar. But we don't need to do this fight, so let's save the time. The part that confuses me, though, and I'm not sure about this, is did we have to go to Smallville to get to the airstrip to get to the airplane, or do we go to Smallville to get the slideways thing after that? I think we go to Smallville to get the slideways teleporter after that point. And that level in particular felt like it was attempting to integrate the overworld a lot better than the other levels. This level in particular is making zero attempt to integrate the overworld. Ultra Humanite. We'll see who that character is. But you definitely get the feeling that there was a couple people pitching ideas, and one idea would have been, let's go to this airstrip and get an airplane and use the airplane to get to the monkey city. Gorilla City is what it's really called. I keep saying monkey when it's gorillas. And then there was somebody else who said, well, we also need a slideways teleporter in a way to get to the watchtower. But it would have made a lot more sense to just think that through a little bit more and say, yes, this should be where you get an airplane, and this should be where you get to the slideways tower and the watchtower. And then, yeah, you could easily have had a open world Gorilla City over to the side here, or just take over the swamp, have multiple instances of the world getting worse and worse. That would have worked actually very nicely if the world was relatively peaceful to start with and then it got worse, although they've never really made a game like that, so it's not surprising they wouldn't get that experimental. Ultra Humanite is who? One of Superman's earliest adversaries, the Ultrahumanite, is a mad scientist who used his genius to enhance his superpowers to transfer his consciousness from body to body. Currently inhabiting the form of an albino gorilla, this dangerous villain's body is nearly as strong as his mind. He showed up in Action Comics number 13 in 1939, which does beg the question as far as who was Superman fighting before then, if he was fighting anyone before then, because Action Comics probably, or very possibly, didn't start with Superman. Nope. He shows up in Action Comics number 1 in 1938. So we found the newest character, I assume, in Grail.
See here? Just your typical mild man.
I would have to assume that, like, her appearance is 2015. And you can see how her character is very dark, and she is a spin-off character, effectively, as the daughter of Darkseid. So it would either be Batman or Superman who would be the oldest characters. Detective Comics number 27 started in 1939, which makes it definitely seem like Action Comics and Detective Comics may have started in the same 1938. Is there any other character here that could possibly be older than Superman? Or is Superman the first superhero concept? Because even Batman really is just a human and a detective character. No, I definitely can't think of anybody that would be older than Superman. But they don't sell him as the first superhero, so there must have been somebody else that showed up first. I guess it is also worth mentioning that Superman definitely is more of an immigrant story than you might think. In that you have this alien that had to effectively flee his homeworld as it was being destroyed, and his parents made that decision for him. Although you don't really run into a lot of parallels later on of Superman being an immigrant and adopting the United States. If anything, he too easily adopts the United States. There is a point relatively recently where Superman came out straight up and said, "Hey, I'm not about the United States of America anymore. I'm about the world and world peace, and I'm not going to just limit myself to being overly patriotic around the United States of America," which that clearly just echoed feelings of the writer and general feelings of the readers. Whereas the original Superman would have been incredibly jingoistic, and in many of his iterations, it would have been incredibly jingoistic. So we're at 90.0 even as far as completion now. We have 70 out of 130 minifigs, so there's still a lot to do. We have 9 more characters to unlock. We still have about 36 more gold bricks to collect, and a whopping 13 graffitis to do, which definitely concerns me because it makes me wonder if there aren't graffiti points in the overworld that are not marked or mentioned anywhere. Or if it is just a case that there's a lot of extra graffiti points because of the DLC stuff, which that may be the case. Like, all these DLC things do have graffiti points and mini kits that lead to maybe more gold bricks. And then these post-game sections also have characters to unlock and graffiti points. Alright. And yeah, you go from Arkham and the overworld into this middle section where it is in Gorilla City, then it's Oa, then you get back to Gotham Museum, and then Sea King Battle is more of an underwater section, which is good. There really was only one underwater section, and then this gets back to the overworld of the LexCorp, but then you get to Apocalypse at that point, and then everything is Apocalypse going down. And we'll mention these that we've already collected everything in. We may even load into them, but we're obviously not going to spend a lot of time in levels that we've collected everything. It's weird that there isn't... Oh no, there it is. I was going to say that it was weird that there wasn't a character to unlock in that level, but there is one. Alright, well, that's going to be it for this recording. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos. If you want to support me further, there's some links down below in the description. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.